Let's now take you back to one of our top stories, which is all about Donald Trump raising the specter of war in Latin America, Caribbean Latin America, with the kind of moves that he's been making vis-a-vis Venezuela and Nicolas Maduro. Let's now talk about it because the latest is the imposition of a no-fly zone over Venezuela. We're joined by Ishwardhan Sinha, former Indian High Commissioner to Venezuela. Good evening to you. Mr. Sinha, what do you make of the latest move and what is it likely to precipitate?
This is a latest manifestation of gunboat diplomacy. I think ever since Venezuela fell out of the US orbit when Hugo Chavez became president in 1998, there has been a persistent attempt by the US to topple the government's, Hugo Chavez's government. There was a coup soon after he took over, and also attempted coup, sorry, and Nicolas Maduro since he took over in 2013 after the demise of Hugo Chavez. However, having said that, we must also realize that the last elections held in Venezuela were a sham, because clearly the opposition candidate Edmundo Gonzalez had won, but the results, in fact, were stayed. The counting was stayed, and the commission that supervises the elections, they announced a victory for the incumbent, for the sitting president, Nicolas Maduro. So obviously, there's a whole host of factors at play here. And the last but not the least, obviously, is the drug menace which President Trump cites as the cause, the real reason for his action at present.
Right. But what about this charge that Nicolas Maduro is backed by the Cartel de los Soles, which is one of the biggest drug cartels, and that is the reason, one big reason. The other, of course, is migrants from Venezuela.
As far as drugs go, there's obviously a problem in the entire, the region there. And the flow of fentanyl has become a big issue as far as the US is concerned, not just in the region, but in dealings with China, for instance, and other countries. President Trump and his administration have emphasized the need to crack down on the fentanyl that is coming into the United States. But, the irony is that most of that fentanyl, or not most, but a large percentage, is coming through Mexico, really. And while I'm not giving Venezuela a clean sheet, I'm sure it is in many ways a kleptocracy, not a democracy. And there may be some truth in that because, they're desperate to survive and their economic situation, they're in very dire economic situation. I mean, imagine Venezuela has the largest oil reserves in the world, more than Russia and more than Saudi Arabia, and yet they have not been able to really exploit their oil resources the way they should have. Earlier, it was entirely under American control, and then when Hugo Chavez came, he nationalized the major oil company, PDVSA. And in fact, since then, there's been a steady, if not a downhill curve as far as Venezuela's oil production is concerned. And you shouldn't forget that in the past, that heavy oil that Venezuela produces was almost not entirely, but a large percentage was sent to the United States, the refineries in the southern United States, in Texas, in Louisiana, where they were refined. But now, of course, Venezuela exports to various countries, including China and even India. India was a major buyer at one point, but not now. I mean, Venezuela is still a supplier, but not a major supplier, simply because their economy is collapsing.
Okay. And this whole prospect of a conflict with Venezuela or a war, in the first place imposing a no-fly zone on a country which is twice the size of California itself is quite huge, deploying the largest airplane carrier that is there, the formation to that region as well in the waters. Again, a huge move. A lot of resources being diverted there as well in terms of US military might. What does it really imply? Would boots be put on the ground? Because the Americans are quite averse to that in general?
It's obviously a very blatant show of force. The Gerald R. Ford, the biggest aircraft carrier, the most sophisticated one that the U.S. has been deployed in those waters in the Caribbean. They have, I think, 12 other ships and a large number of Marines there. But I doubt very much that they will put boots on the ground because Venezuela is not really a walkover. They have they have assistance from countries like China and Russia, and it wouldn't be easy. Of course, the result is a foregone conclusion. However, it won't be really a cakewalk. And in that situation, it's difficult to bomb the country out of the skies as they did in Iraq or in some other countries. It'll be difficult. But if they try and put boots on the ground like in Afghanistan, then there will be a price to pay. So I think President Trump is gauging the situation. I'm not sure whether he's made a decision. Well, the no-fly zone is upping the ante, and we'll have to wait and see what really happens.
And what about the options of, say, what was done by the U.S. primarily, but with the NATO stamp of approval in Libya, which led to the end of Gaddafi's regime, or the other is issue, if to put enough pressure on Maduro to himself seek a way out. I believe that Trump and Maduro spoke as well about a week ago, and the question of amnesty was sort of explored.
I think the only solution that the U.S. wants is Maduro out, and not only Maduro, but the people behind him. Uh, so I think it's going to be very difficult because Maduro himself obviously realizes that if he's out of power, he is finished. Even amnesty, I don't know what sort of amnesty they're looking at, but there will be, reprisals, and law will catch up because he's been extremely brutal in suppressing the opposition, and that's why you had someone like Maria Corina Machado winning the Nobel Peace Prize this year, and you had the Edmundo Gonzalez, the candidate who actually should have been the president today, and he was the substitute candidate because they barred Maria Machado from standing. So I think it's going to be a very difficult bargain for Maduro. I personally feel if he accepts to step down, that would probably solve the problem in terms of lives being spared, or not too many lives being lost. But if he doesn't, and there is an invasion, and don't forget, the United States invaded Grenada some decades ago, but Grenada is a very small country. Venezuela is not the same.
And how do you think the Indian government would be viewing the situation? Because we're still to hear, it's the weekend when Donald Trump made that unilateral sort of an announcement of a no-fly zone. So we haven't really heard from the Ministry of External Affairs. But keeping in mind its interests in the region, what would the Indian government like to see happen?
You see, as far as India is concerned, there are two. One is, of course, a matter of principle. On a matter of principle, we always oppose unilateral action. And that is why we support strengthening the United Nations. The United Nations Security Council should be seized of the matter and take a decision which is in the best interest of global peace. Unfortunately, the United Nations Security Council is moribund and is unable to take action unless the Americans, there was this resolution on Gaza, which is the most bizarre, that the UN Security Council passed recently. But be that as it may, I think the primary responsibility is of the UN and not the United States. But because the United States is known to be taking unilateral action, has taken so in the past, and especially in its own backyard, I think a message is being conveyed, not just to the international community as a whole, but to China and Russia, not to meddle in the region. And if you remember the Cuban Missile Crisis, when the former Soviet Union and the U.S. came very close to what could have been a catastrophic war, I think The US is very sensitive about, other big powers meddling in the region. But I think the reason for that is because the US has been also behaving like a hegemon in that region. And, regime change. In the past, they've been involved in all sorts of coups and change of government. So I think there is a way to resolve this problem. Obviously, Maduro is lost his legitimacy because it's very clear that in the last elections he had lost, and he lost badly. But somehow, with a pliant sort of commission, election commission, or an organization that conducts elections, they completely overturn the result. So it is a very dichotomous situation. However, you don't take the law into your own hands. There are ways and methods of dealing with problems like this.
Okay, but let's see what happens. For the moment, we don't know whether Maduro will sort of give up, or he will be brazen and be in defiance. Still to hear anything on that front, and which will determine which way this latest well, flashpoint really goes. Thanks a lot for joining us for the moment, Basta Sinha.